Hi, and welcome to The Treatment Forum, a podcast about the art of the pitch. This series demystifies the treatment process for commercial directors and photographers by interviewing industry pros, from agency creatives, producers, and brand strategists to established directors and treatment writers. I'm Christina Archer, your host. I'm a director, photographer, and educator. I'm fascinated by the intersection of art and commerce, how ideas traverse from the intangible to the tangible, and how culture shapes advertising and advertising shapes human behavior. This podcast was inspired by winningdirectortreatments.com, a course I created to mentor underrepresented talent. It's designed to empower directors to master their pitches and win their dream jobs. Find out more and enroll on commercialdirectingfilmschool.com. My goal is for these conversations to be a resource, fostering an open dialogue and creating transparency in our industry. Today we talk with Aly Moffat, head of advertising at Odelay Films in the UK, who I also am represented by. We dig into her perspective from the vast array of pitch decks and treatments she has seen working for various directors. Every single director is different. And the process is really just about articulating your vision and not about the bells and whistles of some over-the-top treatment presentation. Stick to the core idea and elevate it. She shares so many insights, and I'm really excited for you to take a listen. From Odelay Films, today we have Aly Moffat, who's head of advertising at my British production company. Understanding the pitch process from your point of view, I feel like is going to be invaluable, and thanks for joining today.
You are welcome. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, well, let's kick it off, because head of advertising is, quite a heavy-hitting title. So, you were my former EP when when Prue was on maternity leave. How closely you have been involved in the director treatment process, guiding and advising, or if you're like more high level, seeking clients and getting the brand name out there. So I'd love to start there.
Yeah. Great. So yes, I am head of advertising, which is a new role that we've created at Odelay when our MD Prudence came back from her maternity cover, and I was asked to stay on, and we felt that we really wanted to have a role that was concentrating completely on our commercial offering. So we created the role of head of advertising. I am actually very much involved with the treatment side of stuff. It's something that I've always been involved with, from kind of producing days through to being an EP and an MD. It's the way that we win the work. So it's really crucial for us to have a handle on that, but also to support our directors in terms of what we can kind of bring in our experience of working maybe with the brand. Maybe it's a brand that they haven't worked with before and we have, or an agency that we have a relationship with. And I think it's a really kind of useful thing to have people who have an overview on the more, kind of stay client side of things. So obviously keeping a really solid eye on creativity, but being able to kind of guide through the drier aspects of the treatment process as well is really crucial to winning those jobs, I think. So yeah, I really like to still support where I can, especially with some of our directors who may be less established, maybe new to treatment writing, have maybe come from a different discipline, long form or TV or something like that, where they just need that extra support as well.
I knew, like, just looking at your background, it felt like you were just sort of expanding to like a bigger purview, but still kind of looking at like the macro and the micro. Super cool to kind of set the table for everybody with, your point of view and perspective. Let's assume it's a triple bid process. And so if you know that you're up against, other companies, you can kind of see where you're put into the box of, the creative's minds. Always curious about strategy from your point of view.
So there's lots of things that I like to do strategically. I'm not actually a fan of knowing who we're pitching against necessarily. Sometimes it can help. Sometimes it can be a real hindrance because you aren't focusing on you and why you have been brought in as a director. You're distracted by the other people. So I don't know. I kind of, sometimes I know, but might not tell the director. Sometimes it is useful because you kind of can know where you are within the level of what's happening, but also you don't want to either be complacent or just think that you don't stand a chance. So sometimes I feel like it can skew your thinking on a pitch process. But what I do always want to do is, ahead of a call, make sure that the director understands the script. You'd be amazed the amount of times that I've gone into a call or a meeting and what you think the script is, the director doesn't think it's the same thing, or the creators have got a completely different idea of what their script is to what the director has read into it, like even down to the core idea. So I think it's always really important to make sure that everyone's on the same page with that. I love a director who has taken the time to prep, to maybe come up with some mood reference. We might not even share it on the call, but it might be something that's like really interesting to speak about, music reference, maybe some casting reference, but just kind of chatting through their idea ahead of the call is I think really crucial. So because then you're going in there really prepped, and I think it's really important to let the agency tell you their story first. They've quite often sat with that script for a really long time. There might be a reason why it's the way it is. It's maybe gone through a lot of research. It's been, gone through many iterations. Sometimes by the time it gets to us, it's been on the table for 6 months. So I think it's always really good to just sit back. And the first thing that we'll always do on a call is just let the creative team tell us their kind of story up to this point. And then obviously we can then say, okay, well, this is where I'm taking it, or the director is, this is where I'm taking it. I always like to record the calls. I either do it as a voice note or record it via Zoom if people are cool with having it recorded. But I think it's amazing the amount you miss when you're on that call and in the moment and listening back to make your notes about what's been said. You sometimes pick up on tone of voice and different things that you maybe thought a different thing, and then you listen back and you're like, oh, actually maybe when I said that idea, they didn't actually love it as much as I thought they did in the time when I was there on the call. So there's just little nuances like that I think really help. But preparation is everything, I think, and that initial first call is really crucial, because that's when the chemistry happens, and you hope that you've kind of sparked something off that call that makes them think of you before you're kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of the treatment side of stuff.
Thinking about how I relate to a lot of those moments of throwing something out there, getting crickets, and it feels like improv. It feels like improvisational, creative brainstorming, because of course you're never going to throw out something that, for sure, that they like, or for sure that it doesn't resonate. So you just kind of have to go in thinking about just being purely yourself and how you see the best vision coming to life. But I do love recording the call and going back to hearing little nuances of, wow, I missed that, and oh, that's what they meant, because there's a lot of things that you're kind of thinking about and you're focusing on the call, and then kind of reviewing it. And that kind of leads us into the next question, which is, I've always wondered, if I nail the creative call, is that a shoo-in? Or, if you totally fail the creative call, but then you nail the treatment, is there a director that gives terrible phone? Then they can give really great ideas in a thoughtful, written way in a treatment. And sometimes the call isn't the strong suit for some directors. And
absolutely. I think it's really hard, and I've worked with a lot of directors over the years that do struggle with the call. The call is a weird situation. It's like Jeopardy. You're kind of pitching yourself. It's like being on Dragon's Den or something like that. It's a real kind of personality thing, and there are some directors who absolutely nail that, and that does definitely give them an advantage. And then there are directors that can really find it really hard, and it shouldn't be down to just that call. And to be honest, I don't think it is. I think it's a real balance between so many different things, because if you, as a producer, have a really good relationship already with the producer or the agency that you're speaking to, then maybe you can prep them a bit and be like, listen, just so you know, I know that this director gets quite nervous on calls, so, I'm just prepping you guys for that. So don't, take this as being him or her not interested in the, sometimes directors can come across that kind of quietness, or like not really feeling like they're engaged, which is actual nervousness, can come across as them just being not interested really, or like feeling that they're kind of above the idea or taken the wrong way. So I think there's things that we can do as producers and as EPs to kind of help that. But I think always, if there's charisma on a call and there's a situation, where everyone is vibing and you're all like agreeing on stuff, and there's, someone puts up forward a reference and the creators are like, oh, that's the reference that we've like had on our desktop for the last like 6 months or whatever, then of course that is always going to help. And from a kind of agency perspective, I guess they're also thinking, depending on the project, I'm going to be working with this person for maybe the next like 2-3 months. Is it going to be an enjoyable process? Do I get on well with them? Am I going to be going to some far-flung country with them for 2 weeks? And, do I want to hang out with these guys? That stuff like that, I'm sure does go through agencies' minds as they're having those calls. So I think, but ultimately, I think it should come down to treatment. That has to be what makes the decision, because that's the document, that's what you're all kind of working towards. And I think otherwise you're just giving the most charismatic person in the room the advantage over everybody else, and that's that's not necessarily a kind of fair thing. And don't get me wrong, when I'm with the director and they're like, really doing a great call, or I'm meeting someone and I'm like, God, I know that I just need to get these guys in a room with them and they're gonna love them, that is also it's always gonna help.
Yeah, definitely. Have you ever seen like situations where you go into, well, I don't know if you feel that often the agency producers share who the preferred company is, and if you know who it is, if it isn't, you and your director, is there moments where the reco is now, it's like shifted and it's unexpected?
Definitely. Yeah. I think it happens more than people think it does. I mean, we all know that there is inevitably going to be, with any creative project, a kind of list of ranking when you go into the call, for sure. But I think that can shift quite dramatically from the call. I think that's why the call is such an important part of the process, because it's chemistry at the end of the day, and unless they've worked with someone before. If you've worked with them before, there's always going to be an advantage in that. And quite often that can be the reason that directors are the recommended, because they've worked with the client before, or they've had a really good relationship with the agency. It's a safe pair of hands. It's someone that the creatives have wanted to work with for a long time, or any of those reasons. But quite often I know that shifts in the meeting. Definitely shifts in the treatment phase. I anecdotally have heard about really quite massive kind of campaigns that were going a certain way, and then no one was really feeling the treatments that have come in, and they've got a different director to pitch over the weekend, which we all hate and is a nightmare. But actually it's ended up with that director winning the job, because they've come in with a completely fresh pair of eyes and brilliant thing, and literally swooped the project from under the clasp of other people. So it definitely happens. And I think also sometimes you go in and your agency recommend, or you've been told that your agency recommend, or you've been told that someone else's agency recommend, and you either win the job or don't win the job, because the client who says, no, actually that person is doing more what I want to do. So I always say to our directors, you've got to be in it to win it, absolutely, and just to put your 100% in, and be very true to yourself as your vision, and that is all you can do. As long as you kind of, and I always feel this, as long as I feel like we put everything we can into that pitch, and the treatment has gone, absolutely how he wanted to. And that sometimes doesn't happen. And it's frustrating when that doesn't happen for various reasons. But, if you've left everything on the floor, then that's all you can do at the end of the day.
Yeah. What do you think makes a winning treatment? Like when you've seen one, or have you seen a lot of what you thought were winning treatments, but they just didn't work? But
yeah, I mean, sometimes I've put in treatments and I'm like, damn, if we don't get this job, it's a miracle. Do you know what I mean? And then we don't for whatever reason. So it's such a tricky one. And obviously I try to speak to agency producers and creative friends and stuff like that about this, and clients as well. What is it? What makes that treatment, really stand out? And I think there's lots of different things. I think it's really important as a director to be true to your own personal vision and for the writing to come from your heart. I think that obviously there's a lot of people who for whatever reason can't write their own treatments. Either they're not very good at writing, they find it really hard, they get writer's block, or that ironically their kind of vision doesn't come across on paper when they write it down. So you might need some help. But what you need to make sure you're doing is that your director voice is coming through whoever it is that's written that treatment. Because people can tell. They can tell immediately if you've not had your hand over that treatment and not had your heart within that treatment. It's like creatives can see that. Now you might be a level of a director that's fine, and they still won't care because you're like, Hollywood or whatever, and so they're just like, we just want you to do it, so that's fine because we know that we're still gonna, be getting you. But often I think that makes such a massive difference. And when I read someone's treatment, I can tell whether their voice is coming through or not. So I think that's really key. I think you have to really make sure that you're showing that you understand the idea. Again, as I was saying before, sometimes the idea just doesn't come across, or you don't explain that you understand the idea. And for the client, maybe not for the agency, but for the client, it's really important in the first couple of pages to really spell out, this is what we're trying to achieve here, because that's what they want to know. They want to know that you're a safe pair of hands and that you understand their idea and that you're going to deliver it. So I think it's really key to keep that in mind, to keep in mind that it's the client ultimately who has sign off on this. The agency can push all they want, but if the client is reticent for whatever reason, then you might lose it off the back of not, really showing that you understand the idea creatively. I think I'm not a fan of massive treatments. I feel like we really should be just putting in what is essential to show the creative idea to its best. So I will always every single image in that treatment should be working. It should be there. It should be relevant. It should be for a reason. It shouldn't just be there because it's a pretty image or whatever. It needs to, every single bit of that treatment needs to be working to show you or show the agency and the client what this film is going to be. So if you didn't even read the words and you scrolled through, you would get a real sense of what this film is going to be. I think that's really important because, quite frankly, some people are going to just scroll through and not read the words, or they're going to scroll through, they're going to skip everything, and they're just going to go to the director's interpretation and the shot list, and they're going to look at the pictures and they're going to read the shot list and they're going to be okay. This director understands what we want to do, or they've taken it in a direction that I love, that's different, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. And then I think it's about, and again, this is where I think really good EPs and producers come in. It's about reading the room and understanding how far you can push an idea, because sometimes the creatives really want you to come and push that idea. They might even say it in their deck that they send to you, be like, go for your life, have fun with this, bring in more ideas, put in different scenes, creatively change this up. But sometimes that job has gone through months and months of research, and literally, and this it can be quite soul destroying for directors, they literally want the script as it's written, and then it's about what can you bring to that? what can you bring to that? You might have an animatic or a storyboard that you've seen or not seen because the agency is hiding the animatic because they don't want you to see it. But it's like, well, okay, what more can I do within those constraints that are being given to me to really elevate this job? And they're two sides of the same coin. Do you know what I mean? And as a good director, you have to be able to maneuver between those two different kind of creative things. But yeah, I think it's kind of ultimately it's understanding what both the agency and the creatives and the client want from you, basically.
Yeah, I've totally been there where the creatives or I get, information that like don't really touch anything with the script. It needs to, or even like some type of pharma stuff, where you just like can't, and then it just makes me spin out in such a way where it's like nothing changes, but what small, or it's like so straightforward of an idea, maybe it's like somebody talking to camera and, and you're like, what do I say? And you just kind of spin out. And those are the moments where I definitely like overthink and spin out, like, what am I bringing? And like, how can I change this without changing it? It's like ironic.
And it's hard. Sometimes you just need to show.
I've mostly been focusing on like, more describing the setup of the shots and the cinematography and the technicality of like how I'm opening, and maybe like here or there like adding some alt lines, but not really touching that as much because I know that they've worked on it for so long, and more so just giving them the visual language of how I see it coming through, and that's what I've been feeling works the best.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes you can, like you said, put in some alt lines, or if you've got a good kind of relationship with the agency, you say, okay, like sometimes the creatives off the back of a call will be like, run some ideas past me. And you might be, okay, I'm going to like literally like email you and say, these are the ideas. We've got a bit of a kind of curveball that we were thinking of putting in there, but we don't want to throw everyone off. Like, what do you think? And I feel like that's always a good sign as well, if you can have that relationship with the agency up front where you can have those conversations ahead of putting in the final job. That's always a good sign, and kind of shows that you're thinking about it, but you're also aware that there's clients involved and all of that kind of stuff. So that can be really good. And one other thing that I would say about the kind of treatment process and as well as keeping it succinct, not making it like a multi 30-page document. No one wants to read a 30, 40, 50-page document. And it's a really good discipline. I know of a few directors who they won't go above 15 pages. Oh. And then that will really squeeze down their treatment, and they have to really, really think about it. They have to really think about what images to keep in, what words to write. It's kind of like a really good discipline for not just, you can sometimes, I think, just go so far the other way, and then you're really losing sight of that kind of core idea. And I also think trying not to kind of overcomplicate film language that clients or agency might not understand so well and stuff like that. They might not really want to know. They might not even know what an anamorphic lens is, although that they might. It's just stuff like that. So a bit of guidance really is useful, I think, as well.
Yeah, that is a very good challenge for myself. You'll see, but I think 15 pages would make every single word very well calculated. But have you had any feedback on the length from the agency side, or you kind of know that they don't want it to go long and long-winded, but do you feel like if it's too short, like there's not a disadvantage as long as it's addressing the core parts of the pitch, of the core parts of the idea?
Yeah, I think as long as you are addressing the core parts of the idea, you're covering, everyone is going to have an intro, a cinematography, a casting, director's interpretation, talking about sound, talking about edit, talking about music, they're covering the locations of the art department. Like, as long as you have gone across every aspect of that side of stuff, then I think that's, you're covered. And you need to, as I said, you've got to, your passion for the project has to come through. That's the most important thing. And the visual imagery has to be bang on. And I think that there's something kind of brilliant about, I'm not necessarily sure that I would be able to do the 15 pages, but I think like 20 pages is quite a good kind of thing to be aiming for. And I haven't had feedback about specific treatments, but I have heard anecdotally from agency producers and creatives that they get quite frustrated with how big treatments have come now, because they're getting this in from like a ton of different people, and they're, it's like, they're like, we honestly don't need all this stuff, but it's a self-perpetuating thing, because no one wants to be the company that's not doing a like 50-page treatment now, in case that's not going to mean that it's going to look like we're not as invested in the job, when actually you're probably coming across as more invested in the job if you've really worked hard to get that treatment down to 20 pages. And maybe the producer says when they put it in, just so you know, our company policy is, or our director policy, this particular director will only do it up to 20 pages. So this is why it's not a, tomb, basically.
Yeah, you guys are so good about like policies, like not emailing after, or not having to have a work email or a work email or something. You could totally kind of have a, maximum page count, and I'm sure it would be like really adopted, because I kind of think I'm in alignment with you. It's more so that I have to refine my language to be tighter and tighter. So it's like when my first draft is way too long. And so I have to kind of go back and like, what am I actually saying in like 3 sentences, not like 6. But I do think that the longer it is and the more long-winded you are, it seems more like you don't know what you're talking about. I think it looks like to me that they're going to lose faith in you, because you're going on and on and on, and they just feel like you're just going in these different directions. So for some reason I thought, as an emerging director, like, go big, talk about everything. And now I'm kind of like full circle in a good place where I feel like I really am very clear on how to best approach the pitch process from that angle too, because, and then you obviously getting these, because then from my point of view, I'm just kind of focused, I'm just like, insular, but then think about that times 3, they're getting 3 director treatments, and then they're probably working on 3 campaigns. What is that? 9 treatments they have to read a week? Like, what? Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So I get it. We don't have time for that. Nobody's got time for that. Have you seen any like out of the box things in treatments, or how common is it for like, Odelay to invest in doing storyboards or doing an animatic? Like, I think sometimes if it's like a Coca-Cola and maybe there aren't boards, but you want to just go 100%, we'll maybe invest more. But I think it's really, sometimes that can also be a bad thing if you're really putting it all out there, but they don't like the boards, and, maybe a shot list is better.
And genuinely, I think that's the case. It really depends on the project. Sometimes with the project, you need the board. Like, boards could be super helpful if I don't know, it's a very visually complicated idea, and you want to somehow. I think what's brilliant now with treatments and technology is that you've got AI for a start. So suddenly you can literally produce imagery that you couldn't get hold of on a Google search or a deep dive into imagery search for 2 days. You can start to create those images, which is really exciting. But also just the use of moving image in treatments now, I think, is amazing, because you can get across like film references that people that maybe don't have the film language that we have wouldn't necessarily understand properly before. or you can bring an energy and a kind of atmosphere to a treatment that you couldn't before when still images were used. So I think those kind of two things have really become a game changer, and those have only really like come about in the last 4 years really. That probably like 3 years ago started to see people using GIFs and stuff in their treatment. So that's really helpful. I was going to tell a story of the one, so back in the day when things were not digital and people were going crazy with their treatments. We were pitching at my old company on a job that was basically for a kind of well-known Australia lager, and it was being shot in Australia on the beach. It was a really funny, creative idea, and the directors who were directing Duo wrote this brilliant treatment, but actually just to go above and beyond it, we packaged it in a box. We sprayed it with coconut suntan lotion. So when they opened up the box, it smelled of suntan lotion. We put sand in the box, and we put a pair of budgie smugglers in there as well. So it was this kind of mad thing when it arrived at the agency and they opened it up. They got this full crazy beach experience.
Oh my God, I hope you
We actually did not win the job. No, we didn't.
What?
No.
Wow.
They said it was amazing and they loved it, but there was a director that they'd been wanting to work with from the start, and they won the job. But they were honestly, it was such a brilliant thing to do, and that did used to happen. I've done some mad treatment things, doing kind of crazy cut out collagey, beautiful kind of picture books and kind of all kinds of crazy stuff. Back in the day, but I think thankfully those days are over, because that was a fairly labor intensive kind of crazy thing that you would do.
Yeah, I mean that's such a good story. Shipping sand, and then you're treatments right in the middle of it. I mean, oh my God.
You open it was a smell came out, and picked up budgie smugglers, and then the treatment was in there, all nicely bound.
Oh my God, that's incredible. You briefly mentioned AI, which actually is funny because I didn't even think to bring it up, but it's been obviously so top of mind. So you've been seeing it more and more. Have you been seeing it more as visual references, or did you mean storyboards, or kind of just all of the above?
I think visual references. I mean, God help us if AI starts to write the treatments, because that is just going to be a sad time for us, but also for any poor creative that's got to read some treatments that have been written by ChatGPT. But I think in terms of imagery, I mean, amazing for that, isn't it? When I think of the amount of times that I've been trying to find, you've had an image researcher for 3 days or whatever, and then the director's like, oh, I just really want to find this image of, I don't know, a young girl on a beach with a cloud that's the shape of a unicorn, that's, I don't know, whatever, and you can literally create that image now. You can find it if you get the right prompts, and as far as that goes for kind of image research and stuff, and for treatment designers, all of the treatment designers are all over that stuff now. They are all learning prompts. They are all working out how best to use that to get the image that the director's after. I guess my only watch out is that, will it come to a point when nothing is perfect? Do you know what I mean? There's something quite great about us finding the images that maybe aren't quite there, but they're there enough, and you create this kind of tapestry to create this mood, and will everything just become so polished and exact that it loses something along the way? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how things pan out, but definitely kind of for treatments, I think it's a massively helpful thing in terms of kind of images, especially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been obviously exploring that in a lot of ways, but I think kind of going back to maybe working with emerging directors, that aren't as experienced, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen or that you feel like directors made, and you're just sort of nurturing them in their career? Obviously outside of like they don't have the spot on the reel, so that's kind of what it is. Like if some of the clients directly want to see exactly what they're doing already existing, and you can't really that's just kind of like cat and mouse, like you're like a catch-22. But I do think, it would be helpful just to, for like some of the listeners here, that, what do you feel like has lost a job for somebody perhaps that you would like to share, if you have anything?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think it's, I'm trying to think if there's any kind of specific kind of things where I thought, they've definitely lost the job on that. I think sometimes it does come down to the call, dare I say it, and not being prepped enough for it, so that you go into a call, and that kind of is down to the production company to make sure that director's prepped. Like if you're going into a call with a director who's not shot a commercial before, or is quite not experienced with these kind of calls and stuff, then it's just so important to support them and make sure that they kind of understand the process and what to say and what not to say, and to let people speak. So sometimes I've been on calls with directors, well, two ways: either a director that literally won't let the agency speak and are kind of bulldozing them with their ideas and not letting the creatives kind of explain their ideas, which can be awful. Or you have a director who literally feels like they're not in the same room as you're in, and I mean, I've literally had a meeting once with a director, and I won't name names, a long time ago, where the agency kind of and the creatives explained everything about the products and this and that, and kind of a really long explanation, and then the director literally asked the question back of what they just spent the last 5 minutes explaining to them. And it was like, oh my God, you've literally not listened to anything that someone's just said. And I mean, I walked out of that meeting just knowing that no, I hope in hell that we were winning that job. When it comes to treatments, I think, again, as I said, it's just about making sure that they are not going off on a weird kind of tangent that doesn't fit in with the idea properly, or they've overcomplicated sometimes with the visual side of stuff, or the camera direction that they're going, or something like that, or putting in images which they like but they aren't relevant, or they're just a bit, there's sometimes you can see treatments and you're like, wow, why have you put that image in? Like, that doesn't work. Like, dare I say it, and this probably never happens, but don't put in the first image that comes up on a Google search. Like, that's never going to win you the treatment. Do you know what I mean? But you'd be amazed the amount of people that, like, it becomes a bit stock imagey, and you can just really see that. So I think it's that stuff like that's really, really important to make sure that you are visually really bringing something. Like, you're the director. Like, I always say to our directors, they've come to you for a reason. And actually, one of the things that I meant to say, which is a useful tip, is I always try and find out what films on the reel that we sent they really liked. Like, what is their reference? So what out of that 5-6 spot reel, what were the ones that you saw and you were like, that's why I want to get this director in? Like, you should always ask, why have you got me in? What is it about my work that you like? Because you might think it's something completely different to what they're thinking.
Yeah, I love when our reps share, your reel was watched like this many times, or because a lot of times I don't even know what the reel was submitted, or I find out much later. But when I know their frame of mind, because as a director, sometimes I have like intersecting, I do humor, but I also do beauty with humor, and not beauty, but like wellness. And so I'm like, is it more of this angle? Like, am I adding some humor, or is it more like lifestyle and, So
exactly. And sometimes it really isn't what you think it is. So you might have put a reel together and you think, oh, well, they've got you because of this particular spot. And then when you ask them, they're like, oh, well, we actually really like the last spot on the reel, which was maybe something that we put in as a, little, this is a nice piece of work, but it's not relevant to the brand. And they've hooked in on something particular in that film that they're like, oh, that's a really interesting thing to bring to this. So it's definitely always worth asking those things. But again, in terms of like the kind of no-nos for treatments, I think it goes back to having an authentic voice and not, making sure that your treatment is yours and owning it. And definitely not trying to be everything. Like some directors' treatments, they're like apologetic with what they're putting in. So they're like, oh, well, we could do this way, or maybe we should do that way, or, it's where there's no like clear vision. I think that's not great as well, because then you're just coming across as someone who cannot make up their mind visually, or, how they want to do this, and they're worried. There's no conviction. And I think it's good to have conviction.
Yeah. That's interesting. I had one more question, which is about the treatment process being paid for, which is kind of the burgeoning in different parts of the world. I think Germany started something called
they have.
And I don't know how well that's going, but I follow them on Instagram. I want to know. I need to talk to them, actually. I would love to interview them. But it recently came up as well at a panel discussion that I went to, focused on women in the industry. And there was a few different things that were thrown out there, asking for it to be funded by the agency, whether it's like, there's a... or even just having language in a treatment that, a mutual disclosure or mutual NDA, so that you're presenting your ideas and that none of them will be taken if they don't choose you. Just a lot of like that type of legal language to try to protect the artists and the directors that spend so much time working on this. But yeah, what have you seen, or do you feel like there's a future where that exists?
It's so tricky, isn't it? Because when it comes to kind of IP and creative ideas, the agencies will just turn around and say, no, that was in another director's treatment, and there's nothing that you can do to prove it or not. And to be honest, there probably is, like 9 times out of 10, maybe both directors have come up with a similar thing because they've looked at the script and they've thought about it, and there's an idea in there, and there's a particular shot, and they've seen the same, they've got the same reference, or there's a film that they love that's got that shot in it or whatever. So it's really difficult to prove. I think that's where it falls down. It's really, really difficult to prove that it's your idea and not someone else's idea. So I'm not really sure how that will work, but it will hopefully make agencies think twice about stealing people's ideas. But ultimately, advertising has forever, and filmmaking, to be fair, is about stealing people's ideas. Well, not stealing people's ideas, but using people's ideas as inspiration for your own ideas, basically. And so has it ever been. So that's tricky. I think in terms of kind of payment for treatments, that's just a really important thing that needs to get sorted out, because production companies are losing tens of thousands of pounds a year on treatments, and it actually makes it an unfair playing field, because there'll be production companies that can afford to do that, and there'll be production companies that can't afford to do that. So it gives the bigger players an advantage, because they have the overheads and the margins to be able to take on a big volume of pitches, whereas smaller production companies don't have that, which means that they are probably having to spend less on their pitching process, and it becomes an uneven playing field before you've even started, because you can't throw all the money at it that you want to, and there'll be production companies there that can, because they have more money to play about with. So I think it's unfair from that perspective, but also massively unfair just from the amount of money that production companies are having to fork out when we are literally the lower bit on this rung of pitching. And I think it's crazy that you know, there's obviously the actual tangible costs that are going out in terms of paying for treatment designers and researchers and stuff, but then there's also the hours and hours of unpaid work that goes into a pitch from both the directors and the producers and the kind of in-house team. And yeah, I think it's kind of criminal that we don't get paid for that. And it's changed. It didn't used to be like that. When I first started in the industry, you didn't do a treatment. I'm that old that I am of the age where literally you would have 3 directors come and meet with the agency, and from that they would decide who was going to get the job once the budgets had been put in. And you know, there wasn't even a one-page treatment. It was just, you know, that the decision was made. And I understand now that you need to have treatments and you need to have a 3-way bid and all of that kind of stuff. But I think it's very unfair that production companies are having to pay for that privilege.
I love the angle of how it feels like almost like you know, monopolizes in a way, because then the big production companies will just continue to get them, and then there will be no other competitors if they can't really compete because that's in the way. But also it was kind of mentioned, even just like being able to cover, you know, if you're a mother and you need to have childcare to be able to focus on this treatment on the weekends, you know, because some people literally, you know, stop everything in their life to do this. And it's it actually got kind of emotional on the stage, because, you know, people are talking about how, like, oh, they can't get that time back. They can't get that, you know, first T-ball game back because they chose to pitch on this thing. They didn't win the job. And, you know, it's not like we're the only industry that you put a lot of effort into something and it doesn't, you know, pay back. But I do think that there are things that we can do to help move this forward to be more equitable.
I also think it will really make agencies and clients think about who they want to pitch on the job. You know, and not, you know, on the side be getting more people in. So it's supposed to be a 3-way pitch, and then they're like, oh, but then the client decided that they wanted, you know, this person to come in, or, you know, and you know, I've been on jobs where it started off as a 3-way pitch, and by the end of it, I know that 6 production companies have pitched on that job. Like that's wow. Terrible, and it happens a lot, you know, and it would stop that from happening. But it is starting to change, and I had a chat with a producer from the UK recently who said he now always asked up front whether there would be any chance of you know, money towards the pitching process, and quite often, if he's got a good relationship with the agency, they'll be like, we'll see where we are at the end of the shoot. You know, if you don't win the job, depending on how my reconciliation has gone, if I can find some money for you, then I will. So phone me back in 3 months' time or whatever if you don't win. And obviously, if you win, then you don't get paid. But if you lose, then I might be able to find you some money. And so I think it's informally starting to happen now, but until it's part of the process, then you're just relying on nice producers, basically.
Yeah. Well, I know I wanted to end on maybe a high note, but maybe to wrap it up, like, what would be, you know, some do's and don'ts, which I think we talked about before, but just how to approach things to kind of set yourself up for success the best that you can. Just reiterating it, I guess we've talked about.
So reiterate it. So I would say always prep for your call. Do prep for your call. Do let the agency tell you about their experience so far and why they've got to where they've got to with the script. What is the history of that script? Do record the call so that you can listen back to it. Do make sure that your treatment is staying true to you tonally, and that your voice as a director is coming through, and be confident. Don't make excuses for ideas that you have. don't water it down because you're worried that you want to please everyone. Like be strong and be convicted in what you're doing. Don't make it 1 million pages long.
Yeah.
Do make sure that every image in that treatment and every visual reference that you put in that treatment is relevant to what you're trying to get across. Don't just put it in there for it being a nice picture. And don't lose heart if you hear who else is pitching. You have to, like I said, you have to be in it to win it, and you can absolutely win a job. You can come in as the last person that's brought in on the pitch, and you can win it. It's happened to me a lot. I've been on many pitches where we've gone in not thinking we're going to win it, and we do because the director's knocked it out of the park in terms of the treatment and the call, and the agencies have turned around to us and gone, wow, like you weren't making up the numbers, but you were definitely third going into this, and you've won the job. So you have to be in it to win it, and so never kind of lose heart. It's getting on the pitch is a massive deal in the first place. And my final thing would be, even if you don't win it, you have met with an agency. You might not be right for this job, but you might be right for something else that they've got coming up. So it's always a win, to be honest. Getting on a pitch is a win because you're getting your work and your process and you as a director in front of new potential creatives.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, Aly. That was we went so deep. We got so much great insights. It was dense. It was nourishing. It was helpful. I know a lot of people are going to find this being extremely helpful from your point of view. So I can't wait to re-listen to this as well and dive in and find my favorite parts to feature. So yeah, thank you, Aly. And thank you for all of the work that you're doing for Odelay. I'm so grateful that you're a part of the team and that we can, have these open conversations, but also grow Odelay and grow my career together. So very, very excited that you are part of that as well.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Always a pleasure to chat to you, Christina. Never a chore.
Yeah, thank you, Aly.
Thank you for listening to the Treatment Forum. Share this with anyone you think could find these insightful conversations useful to growing their career. Please subscribe and write a review to help this resource get into the ears of the right people. If you are interested in learning more about mastering your pitches, visit winningdirectortreatments.com, where I offer a free consult to answer any questions about the course. You can reach me directly on my website and Instagram at archerstudio.co. Excelling at your craft is just the first step, but your success lies in your ability to clearly and succinctly articulate your vision.